Welcome science teachers to Analytical Rubric Writing. I'm your host today, Katie Seago. Before we get started today, I'd like you to make sure that you have several documents at your fingertips. The first one is the Identifying Important Performance Qualities. That's this one right here. You will need that one as we work through the process today. The second document that you'll need is the criteria and rubric ideas. These can all be found in the packet that you received on our early release day, February 18th. They can also be found on the professional development page at both schools. You'll need figure J4 and J6, 4 types of criteria with sample questions and descriptive terms for differences in degree. And you'll need a rubric template. Our goal today is to go through the process one more time, but provide a science example for you so you can see exactly how this applies to your own discipline. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them to Shelley Coover or me. Today we're going to use the Science 8 example from their genetics unit. So when you're working through developing your analytical rubric, the first thing that you'll want to do is remind yourself what the transfer goal is. In this case, it says students will be able to independently use their learning to explain how specific traits are passed from parents to offspring within families. You'll want to keep this in mind as you're going through writing the rubric. Obviously, your next step is going to take a look at the actual performance task. Their performance task is a 2-page document, so what I'm going to ask you to do is pause the video, read the first page, push play, pause the video to read the second page. My job now is to take a look at what qualities I think are important for this task. What should a student be able to do if I'm asking them to have this transfer goal of explaining specific traits being passed from parents to their offspring? So the first part of this process is to go through individually and determine what those qualities are. When I'm doing that, I'm going to do that document here, the criteria and rubric ideas. Quite honestly, when I do this by myself, I work through this document and I just highlight the words on there. You could do it that way, or you could jot down the words on the other document, whatever you feel most comfortable with. I'll go ahead and jot them down on the other document just so you can see how that process would look. Again, I am using these 4 columns just to help me think about what's important for my students. Okay, so individually list the important qualities or traits for, I guess what we're doing here is thinking about that transfer goal, explaining how specific traits are passed from parents to offspring. So I'm just going to say passing traits. Just keep it simple there. So going through that document, the first word that comes to mind is actually the first one, looking at content. And I think that it needs to be accurate. It needs to be correct. I want them to be able to explain it. They should be able to justify why they think the set of parents are the right ones. I think they need to make connections then. Thinking about their Punnett squares and their reasoning should be connected. Might go along with support, but I'm going to go ahead and write it down anyway because it's a word that I like when I think about explaining, passing those traits along. So now I'm going to go to the next column, process. And scanning down, their process should be flawless. If they make a mistake with those Punnett squares, there's going to be a problem with what they come up with for their answer. It needs to be logical. I think it should be sequential. There's a process that you expect them to follow to get to their answer. Okay, going through the quality column. First word that I notice is organized. So really, I'm thinking here of the quality of their final product, what it's like. I think that it should be well crafted. They have to make sense in what they're saying, otherwise I'm not going to understand it. And then finally, the result column. I think it should be informative. I want it to meet standards that have been set. The information should be useful. So from this point, my job is to now talk with my PLC about this information. What we'll do is we'll go through, we'll share what it is that we determined are important qualities or traits, and then we'll whittle it to about 4 to 6 traits. Could you have more? Could you have less? I guess the answer is yes, but you have to think about how you're going to assess those things. So I would go with that guideline of 4 to 6. Let's say that the PLC, we sat down, and these are the traits that we have determined are most important. What I would do right now then is look at which criteria are these coming from? Content, quality, process, result, where are they falling? So when I look at accurate, justified, and making connections, these are all part of content. Okay, so what does that mean? What kind of content am I looking for from them when they're writing about this? I really think what I'm looking for is that they can support. And this is providing that support. Then looking at the next group, flawless, actually is the one all by itself, and that's part of process. Sorry, my handwriting's not the greatest. And this, the process that they're following, is using that Punnett square. And then the organized and well-crafted is the actual way that they're explaining it. So that's their quality. That falls under, those words fall under quality. And this is where we're asking, you guys are asking the students to use the race strategy in their writing. You might be asking yourself, I'm a science teacher, why am I grading their writing? Well, you're asking that students are able to explain, and the way that they're going to do that is through the writing. If you or your PLC struggles at any point when you're trying to come up with those traits, one thing that you can do, or which criteria you are going to use, one of the things you can do is take a look at this document. This will help you through quite a bit. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry. This is figure J4, the 4 types of criteria with sample questions. So if you're really struggling with that list of words, I would consult these questions here. They would be something that could help guide your discussion or guide your thinking. I'm actually ready now to start building my rubric. And this figure right here, J6, the descriptive terms for differences in degree, is the thing that will guide my thinking. This is where we can get the stems for each section of the rubric. It's very helpful because we know what we want them to do, but this gives us some of that wording. So I'll be using this document as I'm working through the rubric writing. Okay, here comes the big work. Students are explaining their understanding, so the facet that they're using is explaining. And the specific product or performance that they'll be producing will be this race paragraph. That explains why the parents are chosen. And so when I think about the columns that I want to have here, thinking about content, we already said that content is really students supporting their ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and put here, I want to use student-friendly things, something that they'll understand. So I'm going to say ideas and supporting details. My next column is where I want to focus on the process. And you know what? I think I'm just going to call that process. I think that that is still in the students' vocabulary. I think they'll be able to make sense of that, so I'm going to leave that the way it is. And then the final column will be organization. For right now, I'm not concerned about the weights. I'll come back to that in a little bit. So thinking about ideas and supporting details, I'm thinking about their content. I want to know how much they understand. And so using that figure J6, my degree terms, I'm going to look at degrees of understanding. So those will be the stems that I'm using through this column. So I'm thinking I'll use thorough, if I can spell it correctly. Thoroughly explains why parents are chosen. Keep it simple. There's no reason that this has to be crazily worded. We want the students to be able to understand. This should be written in their language. So using the degrees then again for understanding. The next is substantial. So the students have substantial explanation why parents are chosen. My next section down is partial. So they have partial explanation of chosen parents. Maybe they're missing some key points here. Pardon the bell. Sorry. And the final section is going to be misunderstandings. So there are misunderstandings in the explanation of why parents are chosen. I might go through later and clean up some of this wording here so that they're a little more uniform. But right now, this is my rough draft, so I'm just getting my thoughts down on paper. Okay, I'm ready for the process column now. In process, when we talked earlier, we're really thinking about the Punnett squares. So that's going to be my focus here. This is how I'm going to assess if they've done their Punnett squares or where they are in their understanding of Punnett squares. So this column, I'm going to go ahead and make it black just to keep our eyes, make it easier on our eyes, I think. Thinking about process, I really feel like that's something, we're talking about their accuracy. That's what's important here. So I'm going to use the degrees of accuracy. And the first one is completely accurate. So we'll say Punnett squares are completely accurate. The next one down then is Punnett squares are generally accurate. And maybe they have one little mistake in there or a couple of little things that, they follow the right process. Next one down, Punnett squares, if I can type, are inaccurate. They have some issues going on here. And the final one then will be that there are major inaccuracies. Maybe they completely set it up incorrectly. Based on what they did with the Punnett squares, you have no idea if they understand. Well, I guess you do know that they don't understand. Okay, so that's it for this column now. Now I'm ready to move on to organization. So thinking about organization, I'm thinking about their writing. Have they organized it so that I can understand it? So I think what I'll go with here is clarity, degrees of clarity. So I'm going to say that their writing is exceptionally clear and well crafted. It's crafted in a way that the reader can understand what they're talking about or writing about. The next one, writing is generally clear. And able to follow. Should we say the reader? And reader is able to follow. My next one down, the writing lacks clarity and is difficult to follow. And finally, writing is unclear and is impossible to follow. Obviously, we are not using this column for this assignment. So now that I've gone through, I have words in each of these categories, each of these boxes. Maybe I feel like there are some things that I want to add. This would be a good time to go through and revise, add some additional information if you would like to. I'm going to leave it as is right now for the sake of our time. But I want to think about my weights now and what is most important. So as a science teacher, thinking about my genetics unit, thinking about my transfer goal of students being able to explain how specific traits are passed, what is most important here? And I think that it's the ideas and supporting details. That's the content. That's most important to me right now. So I'm going to go ahead and weight that by 3. I think their process is really important. I want them to understand how those Punnett squares work, so I'll weight that by 2. And then organization, I'm not going to give it any weight. I'm just going to make that its normal points. What I would do is go ahead and put those points in the boxes so that you don't have to worry about this math when you're figuring it out with your students, when you're grading. So I would put a 12 in here. I'm multiplying that 4 and 3. That makes this a 9. Look at that. I can do some math. That makes this 6. That makes this 3. This would be worth 8 points multiplying the 2 and the 4. This is 6. This is 4. This is 2. And then these will be face value, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So where the student is in each of these categories is where their score would be. Finally, what I need to do is take a look at my mastery. So take a look, remember this is our continuum of learning, looking at all the 4s. And what I want to ask myself, if a student scored all 4s, then can they show mastery of the transfer goal? Thoroughly explaining my parents are chosen, Punnett squares are completely accurate, and writing is exceptionally clear and well crafted. Look at my transfer goal, explain how specific traits are passed from parents to offspring within families. Yes, I feel like this does that job. If my answer is no, it's time to go back and do some tweaking. So that should be it for today. Just a couple of reminders before we finish out. Trust the process. Remember, this is a journey, like my little sailboat there in the corner. Follow that process. You will see gains from it, I believe. Also, don't forget that analytical rubrics provide feedback to both you and the students. The students can have a visual attached to words where they are on the continuum of understanding. And then as the teacher, you can use that as a reflection on instruction and also content. As you're working through this process, as always, if you have any questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me or Shelly. We would be more than happy to help you with an area where you just feel stuck. Thanks for listening today, guys. Have a great day.